This is your first interview since being elected, so we've got a lot to cover, and we appreciate your time, certainly. Let's start with today. You announced some key members of your cabinet today, a very experienced group, a very diverse group. Clearly, you're trying to send a message. Can you articulate what that message is?
America's back. We're at the head of the table once again. I've spoken with over 20 world leaders, and they all are literally really pleased and somewhat excited. America's going to reassert its role in the world and be a coalition builder, building alliances again and making sure that we are at the head of the table. Because all the problems we face, from COVID to nuclear proliferation to all the problems we face, require alliances, require a world that is organized with democracies being together. And they're looking for us to do that.
This lineup, those you've selected so far, a lot of familiar faces among them. What do you say to those who are wondering if you're trying to create a third Obama term?
This is not a third Obama term because we face a totally different world than we faced in the Obama-Biden administration. President Trump has changed the landscape. It's become America first, which meant America alone. We find ourselves in a position where our alliances are being frayed, where there's not certainty what we've embraced autocrats. It's a totally different world. And it changes every 4 years, but it's changed drastically in the last 4 to 6 years. It's a totally different. That's why I found people who joined the administration in key points that represent the spectrum of the American people as well as the spectrum of the Democratic Party.
Have you considered, for the sake of national unity, selecting or nominating a Republican, someone who voted for President Trump?
Yes, and we still have a lot more appointments to make. But as I said, and we've had this discussion before, I think, Lester, I want this country to be united. The purpose of our administration is, once again, united. We can't keep this virulent political dialogue going. It has to end. It has to end. We have to unite the country, and in order to unite the world, to unite our allies and our friends. And so there are a number of really qualified Republicans for positions that could be serving in my administration.
Should we expect an announcement?
No.
Not ever or not soon?
No, not soon.
Okay. What about former rivals from your own party, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren? Have you talked to them about cabinet positions?
Well, I've talked to them. Look, as I said, we already have significant representation among progressives in our administration, but there's nothing really off the table. But one thing is really critical. I'm going to need forceful leaders in the Senate and in the House of Representatives because we have such close, very close margins now. And so taking someone out of the Senate, taking someone out of the House, particularly a person of consequence, is a really difficult decision that would have to be made, and it would have to be made in consultation with the minority leader, hopefully the majority leader if we win the 2 seats in the United States Senate in Georgia, and the Speaker of the House, because, I have a very ambitious, very progressive agenda, and it's going to take really strong leaders in the House and Senate to get it done.
So it's a political calculation as to...
Well, yes. It's not based on my lack of respect or my lack of confidence in the ability of Elizabeth Warren. She's one of the brightest people I know, fully capable of doing a number of jobs, and the same with Bernie Sanders.
The head of the GSA yesterday unlocked the mechanisms for there to be a formal transition of power, recognizing your status right now. Is that happening on the ground? Are there people talking right now who weren't talking yesterday?
Yes. Immediately, we've gotten outreach from the national security shop, from just across the board. And they're already working out my ability to get presidential daily briefs. We're already working out, meeting with the COVID team in the White House and how to not only distribute, but get from a vaccine being distributed to being a person able to get vaccinated. So I think we're going to not be so far behind the curve as we thought we might be in the past. And there's a lot of immediate discussion, and I must say the outreach has been sincere. It's not been begrudging so far, and I don't expect it to be. So yes, it's already begun.
Did you receive the presidential daily brief today?
Not today, but it will be starting very shortly, maybe as early as tomorrow.
And the same with a classified briefing. You expect that soon?
Yes. Well, the presidential daily brief is what is happening at the moment in the intelligence community, and the classified briefing of the state of play would also come with that at the time. And but there's setting up the mechanisms to have a secure room in which to do it, et cetera. How to get that done? That's in play right now.
Have you had any conversations with President Trump post-election about paving the way for this transition to happen? Any back-channel communications?
No, I believe that his chief of staff and my chief of staff have spoken, but no, I have not heard anything from President Trump.
And again, you don't anticipate any harm from this delay in terms of your ability to do what you want starting day one?
No, look, it's a slow start, but it's starting, and there's 2 months left to go, so I'm feeling good about the ability to be able to get up to speed, and I fully expect, based on what we've heard so far, we'll get full cooperation from each of the agencies in question.
I'm curious how much you expected things to play out the way they have. President Trump was very clear that if he lost, he would do some of the very mechanisms we've seen him do. You heard that talk. Did you plan for it? Have you been operating under the assumption this was going to happen?
We've been operating under the assumption that although we won, looks like we're going to win with over 80 million votes, looks like we're going to have 306 or 406, I forget the exact number, electoral votes. But I didn't expect it to go smoothly. The president signaled from even before the election began that he thought that he implied that it wasn't going to be fair, his absentee ballot things, his mail-in ballots, things with the post office. But I was confident, and I really mean this, I think we had this discussion, that the American people are going to show up. The American people were not going to be silenced. And they showed up in record numbers. In the middle of a pandemic, some stood in line for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. So I was confident the American people would speak. I must tell you, I wasn't confident the president would accept the voice that they sounded. We felt good about this election from the beginning, and didn't take anything for granted. But I was not surprised by the response of the president himself.
Let's move and look forward. The day you take office, there could be 2, maybe 3 vaccines out there.
Yes.
We understand that healthcare workers will be first in line. What about the rest of us? How will it roll out? Will we go to our doctor's office? Will we line up at a stadium to get them? Who will determine the order of recipients?
Well, look, first of all, allegedly I don't mean that in an accusatory way. Allegedly, the administration has set up a rollout how they think it should occur, what will be available, when, and how. And we'll look at that, and we may alter that. We may keep the exact same outline. But that's in train now. We haven't gotten that briefing yet. Secondly, I think as you may know, I've had a Zoom with the leading governors in the country, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. We've talked extensively about the need to cooperate and get the vaccine into places where you can actually get vaccinated, and their ideas of who they think should go first. I think we should be focusing on, obviously, the docs, the nurses, those people who are the first responders. I think we should also be focusing on being able to open schools as rapidly as we can. I think it can be done safely, but that's a process. And then I met with 50 mayors yesterday on the Zoom. They're Democrats and Republicans, as many Republicans as Democrats. And there's a unanimity among the people on the ground who have to do the daily work and deal with this COVID, that there's a need for a national standard, number one. national standards as to how they should proceed under what circumstances, not just in terms of distribution of the vaccine, but the money needed in order to be able to follow through on this. And that's going to take, it's been estimated that it'll be tens of millions of dollars just to be able to distribute the vaccine. And there are now 3 different vaccines that are in play. So there's a lot to work out in the next 2 months as to exactly how it will be distributed. Now, maybe the hope is we can actually begin to distribute it. This administration can begin to distribute it before we are sworn in and take office. But that's all in train now, Lester. I put together a group of leading scientists made up of some of the best people in the world in the United States here. And they've been thinking this through. They've been meeting with and talking to the companies like Moderna and Pfizer and the rest as to the nature of what they expect their vaccine to do and when and how. And so it's all in train right now. I'm feeling good, though, that now we'll be able to get all the hard data we need, which has been unavailable to us now.
But should we be disturbed that up until this point, there's been not even coordination on the level of, how this is going to work in broad terms?
Well, look, I'd rather look forward than behind. I'd rather look forward and rather than what didn't happen. Obviously, it'd be better if it happened on day one, on the day on election day. But it's happening now, and I am hopeful that we're going to be able to put together a well-researched, well-calculated ability to distribute the vaccine, prioritize who gets it, and actually go from a vaccine to a vaccination, making sure that particularly those communities have been badly hurt. The black community, 3 times as likely to die if they get COVID. The Hispanic community, the Latino community, the Asian. I think those communities have to be counted in and make sure it's available to them. And that's part of what I'm going to insist on in the way we move forward.
What are we facing? You've been as a candidate, you were very clear that we're heading into some of the darkest days right now. We know the vaccine is going to happen. But as we speak, people are ignoring advice to stay home. They're crowding airports around the country right now. You've called for a national mask mandate. How much power as president will you have to influence people in ways you have not been able to as a candidate?
I hope as president, and many of the Republican governors and mayors felt the same way, I hope that we're going to be able to have a united voice on the need to mask, socially distance, testing, and tracing. They're critical pieces to dealing with bringing down this virus in a more manageable place. There's expectations that could be as many as another 100 to 125,000 people dead between now and the time we're sworn in. And I think that I was really encouraged in dealing with the Republican governors and the Republican members of the mayors throughout America, that they are doing mask mandates now, many of them. They are insisting that we have to do this. They're insisting, and it's a matter of communicating to people that this is not, we understand how tough it is. We understand how tough it is. But it's a hell of a lot easier than looking at an empty chair at Christmas dinner. It's a hell of a lot easier. And people are beginning, and the more people, unfortunately, who know someone who had COVID and or died from it, has increased the sense of urgency on the part of many people. I just think that the more we can get out in a single voice, Democrats and Republican leaders, the more people listen. The words of a president matter. And I think it's critically important. I think it's a patriotic responsibility to wear a mask, to socially distance, to make sure that you are, and one of the things we want to do, and I'm anxious to hear where the COVID team in the White House is, and that is we have to have rapid testing. We have to the ability to have responsible rapid testing so that it can be done on a repeated basis so people can open businesses, open schools, open businesses, to do a whole range of things where we engage in providing greater security.
A moment ago, you mentioned schools. I want to ask you about that. New York City recently went back to at-home learning only. Some other big cities have made the same choice. What will you do to get kids back in school? How much will you be working the phones and working with governors and mayors?
It takes a lot of money to get them back. The estimates are $150 to $200 billion for the year it would take to get safely open our schools. For example, we know that we have to change everything from the ventilation systems in schools. We know we have to change the sanitary. We have to make sure everyone from sanitary workers right through to the bus drivers, they have to be clued in. They have to be protected. They need the PPE. They need the gear. They need the ability to have smaller modules of classes. So you, instead of having 30 kids in a classroom, you have mods that we have 6, 8, 10, 12. That means we have to have more school teachers in the class. It costs more money. We have to have plastic shielding that separate people so they can, in fact, not be in a circumstance.
How are you going to get all that, though?
Well, you get all that by passing what has already been passed in the HEROES Act, stepping up and taking on the responsibility. And Lester, it's the same with businesses. Imagine how different it would be if businesses had the ability to have the wherewithal to provide for the sanitation, the ventilation, the distancing, as well as the separation from everything from booths in a restaurant, so that you are increasingly able to be together in circumstances where people are masked as well as distanced.
And speaking of businesses, you've got schools closed right now in places where restaurants are open. Are our priorities correct?
I think we should be able to do both. But look, I'm very concerned about the schools. And for example, I was on the call yesterday was Mayor de Blasio, the largest school district in the country. He is in a position where it costs tens of millions of dollars to be able to safely open his schools. And you have to deal with the whole notion of inter-city travel, interstate travel. There's a whole range of things. And what they all said, Lester, is there's no national standards that are put out. A national standard. This is the circumstance under which you should consider doing the following. This is the wherewithal. This is what we're going to provide. This is how we're going to help. Because when children are out of school, no matter what their background is, for more than essentially a semester, they find themselves falling back much more than a semester. Some falling back beyond that. And it's hard to catch back up. And it's been pointed out by a number of the rural school districts. They don't even have broadband. They don't have the broadband available for the computers to get hooked up so kids can learn from home. So there's a lot we can do, but it is the single best expenditure of our dollars we could engage in now is to provide for these kinds of protection. Not only protective gear, but the PPP, meaning the ability to allow businesses and other operations to be able to open and have the wherewithal, the financial aid to open safely.
2020 is not only the year of COVID, it's the year of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd. If something like one of those cases happens on your watch, what will be the response? How will the Biden administration approach that?
Well, first of all, the way we approached it in the last administration, and that is not hype it up, not make it, look at the facts, make sure that it is determined what happened, have the agency, the police agency, have to be investigated if in fact it were, get all the detail, and also make it clear that we're going to, in the meantime, be bringing, which we're going to do when we take office, bringing the community as well as police together at one table to begin to work out. Look, the only thing I know all the years I've worked with both the community as well as police is that the only people who dislike bad cops more than the community are cops. The vast majority of them are straight, honest, and responsible. And the last thing they need is bad cops, cops who are act out. And so there has to be accountability, and we're going to be working with police chiefs, with the community, with civil rights organizations, and convening conferences in the White House, to determine how we move forward. It's about bringing people together.
I want to ask you about climate change. You named John Kerry as your climate change
Yes.
czar. You've given him National Security Council status. Obviously, it speaks a lot to the direction you want to go. You want to re-enter the Paris Accord. But what next? What does it look like?
What
An
it looks like
administration
is,
committed to this.
I'll be parochial for a minute. You may recall I did one of these convening of leading corporate leaders from General Motors to Home Depot, on the screen, as well as the leading labor organizations. And everybody said, God, you're putting these together? And I made it clear that I'm a labor guy. Well, guess what? The chairman of the board of General Motors, when I told her my climate plan, said, I'm all in. I'm in, as did the IBW and other folks there, because they figured out it's a way to create jobs. So you saw on the front page of the New York Times, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, the chairman of the board of General Motors saying, after talking with Biden, we're withdrawing our suit against California for having a higher standard set for emissions than we wanted. We're withdrawing it and we're prepared to work with President-elect Biden to deal with moving toward all electric vehicles, because that's what he wants to do. We're ready to do that.
What's your message to other businesses who?
Well, across the board, this is the way we can create significant economic growth for people. For example, no one's going to be punished because they are in fact but the idea we're not going to move toward reducing fossil fuels, the idea we're not going to move toward renewable energy, the idea we're not going to invest in a new infrastructure that is a green infrastructure. For example, my plan is to have 550,000 charging stations on all new highways that we build in the United States of America or repair as we upgrade the capability. The infrastructure desperately is needed, even if we didn't have a COVID crisis, even if we did not have a circumstance where we have a climate change problem. We have thousands of bridges that are under that people shouldn't be riding over. We have highways and ports and airports that need to be moved into the 21st century so we can be competitive with the rest of the world. Businesses understand that the way, in fact, they increase their ability to have output is to be able to manufacture and move their material out. As I said to the mayors yesterday, when you're trying to attract a new business to your community, what's the first thing they ask? Do you have an ample water supply? Do you have an ample highway system? Do you have access to rail? Do you have high-speed rail? And all those things. Well, that's what we're going to do. I oversaw the largest investment because the president, the last president, the Obama administration, asked me to run the Recovery Act, the single largest investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower's Interstate Highway Commission. It generated thousands and millions of new jobs, not at $7 an hour, or even at $15 an hour, which should be the minimum wage, but at prevailing wage, $45, $50 an hour with benefits. The same thing will happen here. The same thing will happen here. So that we're in a position that the economic benefit that flows from investment in infrastructure and in a green infrastructure increases economic growth. That's why you have Moody's saying that the proposal I've laid out would increase the number of jobs by 18.6 million jobs in 4 years.
I recognize I'm pushing the clock here, so if you'll just bear with me, I just want to get a sense of.
Sure.
Tell me about day one of the White House and day 1 through 100, your first 100 days. What are your priorities going to be on those first days?
Well, my priorities, there are a number of things that have to be. Let me back up. Some of it's going to depend on the kind of cooperation I can or cannot get from the United States Congress. But I made a commitment in the first 100 days. I will send an immigration bill to the United States Senate with a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people in America. I will also be moving to do away with some of the, I think, very damaging executive orders that have significantly impacted on making the climate worse and making us less healthy, from methane to a whole range of things the president has done, as, in my view, has eviscerated the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. There's also things that I want to do that relate to the ability to make sure we get immediate assistance to state and local governments to keep them from basically going under. By that I mean, every state and local government has to have a balanced budget. Our founders were pretty smart, allowing the federal government to deficit spend in times of crisis to generate economic growth. And so we need, for example, what's going to happen if they don't get additional aid, they're going to have to start laying off first responders, cops, firefighters, nurses, docs, public health organizations, because they can't afford it. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the money to do it. So it's going to be, instead of what in a normal circumstance you'd set your priorities, there's multiple things that are going to have to be taking place at the same time. In addition to that, one of the things of the 20 world leaders I've already met with, and there's another 70, over 70 who I'm waiting to talk to, have called, there's an overwhelming interest in us coming back to in the international community and multilateral organizations to meet. For example, I met with the new head of NATO, wanting me to show up to the NATO conference. I've been asked to do in Asia, the ASEAN, and there's a whole range of things we're going to have to do in the process of delegating to the foreign policy team the authority to go out and reassure that we're back. America's word can be kept. We mean what we say we'll commit to, and that we are committed. So, but the most important thing, I think, is while we try to do all of this, focus on those folks who are always, when crisis hits, they're the first one hit, and when recovery comes, they're the last one in. That's basically minority communities who've been hurt very badly. You know, I know you know because you're so darn informed, that tens of thousands, millions of people are living on the edge where they're going to get kicked out of their apartment because they can't afford their rent. 20 million people worried about whether they can pay their next mortgage payment. Making sure we get the aid that was voted on in the House and was passed by the Senate in some cases, and much of which is not passed, get the kind of help to keep people afloat. People, I mean, I remember my dad being restless. My bedroom was next to his, when my two brothers and I were in the same bedroom. And I remember one night feeling, I could hear my dad. You could just hear the bed move, the sort of the headboard, and really you could. And so the next morning I said, "Mom, what's wrong with Dad?" He said, "Honey, he's worried. We just lost he had moved jobs. He lost his health insurance. He doesn't know what to do." Think of all the people who are laying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, God forbid, what happens? We have to act. We have to act to guarantee them they have access to affordable health insurance. This is more than just a financial crisis. It's a crisis that is causing real mental stress for millions of people. Millions of people. And it's within our power to solve it and to grow the economy at the same time. The same time.
I know I'm out of time, but I have to ask you, some Democrats want investigations to go forward against President Trump after he leaves office. Do you support that?
I will not do what this president does and use the Justice Department as my vehicle to insist that something happen. There are a number of investigations that I've read about that are at a state level. There's nothing at all I can or cannot do about that. But I'm focused on getting the American public back at a place where they have some certainty, some surety, some knowledge that they can make it. The middle class and the working class people are being crushed. That's my focus.
What was the moment when you heard that you were projected? This is the third time.
Well, I know this sounds awful. We had this discussion too. I was confident we were going to win this election. I really was. Because I was so certain the American people were going to speak out. I mean, this is the largest turnout in the history of the United States of America. Not just for me, across the board. People are really, 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 really worried and concerned. And they want something done, both sides. And after 30 lawsuits were thrown out in rapid succession and with some very biting court decisions from Republican-appointed federal judges, I was convinced it was just a matter of time and was going to happen. And that's why I've decided just to move on as if I were the nominee and do the business I would do within my power from the day the election occurred. And that's why I've moved along as if I'm the president.
You decided to act like you own it.
Yeah, I mean, because I believe we did, and I think it's important to send the message that of confidence and surety, and let people know what I will do. Give them some glimpse into what I will do. That's why I started off with the COVID decision and who I appointed and putting together that group. I think people are just looking, is somebody taking this seriously? And I am deadly earnest about what I want to do. And I believe, I truly believe that I can unite this country. I think the country is so hungry for it, including a lot of Republicans.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.